I wanted to just kind of give you a sense of the purpose of this particular seminar. I wanted to thank you as well, those of you who were able to do the quick kind of interview and complete the process that we asked you to help prompt you for this particular webinar. But our hopes for this call and the objectives and what Dr. Lewis is prepared to share with us is related to developing cultural definitions for health and wellness. I'm thinking specifically about culturally appropriate indicators of health and wellness, with the hopes of really deepening your own understanding of your cultural perspectives of health and wellness, and thinking specifically, though, as well about the target population that you're working with, and identifying specific ways to integrate any insights or new learnings or deepening of understanding into your team's initiatives or into your aim. So that is our intent for the next hour and a half or 2 hours that we're going to spend together this morning. And what we will do, you guys, we've all been through this before, but as you know, you're muted. If you have questions or have things that come up during the course of the webinar, during the presentation, please use the feature to the right to send questions or raise your hands or chat so that we can respond. But what we'll do is have Dr. Lewis present, and then have opportunities for Q&A at the end, and give any additional updates and information that's related to the project to Helly at that point in time.
And we also wanted to add about the homework assignment. We know that you guys had a homework assignment for this particular webinar, and we're glad that you, as many of you as could, complete it. We know that some of you struggled with it, and I know that some of you didn't have the opportunity to discuss it with your teams, but really the objective behind that assignment was to evaluate your own perception of health and wellness, and then compared to your aim statements that you've developed within your teams. So if your team was working in Merced, you would have interviewed somebody from the LGBT community. If you were working in San Francisco, you would have interviewed somebody from the African American community in Bayview, Hunters Point, or within that neighborhood region. And then also if you were in Los Angeles, you would have interviewed somebody within the capacity of either promotores or the Ethiopian community. If you were in Tri-City, you would have interviewed somebody within the indigent population. And the idea was that as leaders, we often need to be reminded of the voices in the community and what their perspectives are as well, to see if that aligns with whatever our aim statements are. And some of you felt that you were on target, which is awesome. And then others, you know, had some reflection of how you can take into consideration this perspective and this point of view. And so really that was the objective, and hopefully you guys will go ahead in your next Helly team meeting that you have within your counties, have the opportunity to have a little bit more in-depth dialogue. And it's okay if you guys haven't covered the definition of health and wellness within your own Helly team, but it's a great opportunity to see, do we have common working definitions as a team, because that's part of our leadership development as well as your team building process.
Thank you, Christina. So for kind of giving that bigger, broader perspective of the intent behind the homework. So we hope that you'll, again, use some of that information to help you as you move forward. So without kind of further ado, let me go ahead and introduce our speaker for today. LaVonna Blair-Lewis is a PhD and has an MPH. She's a teaching professor and the director of undergraduate programs at the USC Full-Price School of Public Policy. She's also the director of the USC Diversity and Healthcare Leadership Institute, explained in greater detail in a moment. Dr. Lewis joined the USC faculty in 1996 from Rice University, where she received her PhD in political science, and she was selected Undergraduate Professor of the Year in 1998 and 2001. In 2013, she was selected Professor of the Year for the Masters in Health Administration program. Dr. Lewis's areas of research and professional interest consistently focus on cultural competency and health disparities, both targeting the health status and healthcare needs of underrepresented groups. As such, she feels she has a twofold mission in life: to make the invisible visible. If people are blind or unaware of problems for a particular group or in a particular community, you have to find ways to get these problems on their radar screen. And to make people uncomfortable. She believes that if people are always comfortable, they aren't being challenged or they have quit learning and growing. In an effort to address cultural competency, Dr. Lewis established the USC Diversity in Healthcare Leadership Initiative, which was started in 2002, with initial funding by the California Wellness Foundation. Its signature program is the Summer Enrichment Program, which is offered in both Los Angeles and Sacramento, and which introduces career options in healthcare management to graduating baccalaureate students and undergraduates who may have an interest in health but are unaware of the scope of opportunities available in healthcare management. The initial goal of the program was to increase the number of students from underrepresented groups applying to and enrolling in programs in health management, public health, and health policy, but it has since been expanded to all students. In addition, she serves as a cultural competency consultant for hospitals and other healthcare organizations as they seek to develop strategies and plans to enhance the cultural competency of their staff. She's currently involved in multiple projects that address racial and ethnic health disparities in cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and infant mortality. From 1999 to 2012, she worked with a Los Angeles-based community-based organization, the Community Health Councils Incorporated, on the African American Building a Legacy of Health project. The project, funded by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, was a community-based project that explores individual, organizational, and community support and barriers to healthy living, a key factor in reducing cardiovascular disease and diabetes. Additional funding from the CDC in the form of Community Transformation Grant and REACH Demonstration Grant will explore lessons learned in the AABLH project and other ethnic enclaves and communities in LA County. In addition, the new projects will work with additional partners and other types of community organizations, including schools and federally qualified health centers. Dr. Lewis's work has appeared in the American Journal of Public Health, Family and Community Health, the Journal of General Internal Medicine, and other health management and policy journals. Moreover, all of the work to date has employed a community-based participatory research framework that partners with the relevant stakeholder groups in developing the research question. So as you can tell from the bio that I have read, Dr. Lewis has an extensive history and expertise in this area, and we are pleased to have her speak to us today about perspectives on health and wellness. So at this point, Dr. Lewis, we turn it over to you.
Thank you very much for both the introduction and for the opportunity. I'm hoping that everyone can hear me okay.
Yes, so I think we're here all muted.
All righty, thank you so much.
So if anybody can't hear, please raise your hand and we can try and help you.
So go ahead, Dr. Lewis.
All right, so here's what I've put together for the agenda for today. I'm an academic, and I guess one of the things that I always want to do first is to make sure that we're all on the same page, just in terms of some of the terminology that we use, and kind of the example that was just given in terms of getting some definitions from the community. I think kind of makes clear why I think that's critical to do that. And I also want to talk about some issues as it relates to leading change. Whether we like to admit it or not, change is difficult, it's uncomfortable, and most of us would rather not do too much of it. But I mean, part of the initiative that you're involved in is really about taking on responsibilities to take communities and perhaps your organizations in different directions, and so we'll talk about that, and then we'll kind of wrap up, and I will be happy to answer any questions as we go through. And so when I want to start by saying that if I say something along the lines of Lavonna Lewis land, what I really want you to understand is, like, this is the world according to me, and part of what I want us to think about is that's why this issue of perspectives is critical, because whether or not we admit it or not, we all come to a particular space with some expectations, some experiences, and all of those are kind of shaping everything that we see. And so we want to kind of get that on your mind as soon as possible. So we'll deal with some of the demographics and diversity, some other definitions in terms of value, and we'll view culture and cultural competency and kind of health and wellness. And again, if this is stuff that you've covered before, I apologize, but I just want to make sure that we're talking the same language. And so I should also say that I'm originally from Oklahoma, and I've been told that I talk fast. And so if anyone thinks I'm talking too fast, raise your hand, and I will slow down. Okay. So just to kind of set the context, I mean, we are sitting in various places in the state of California, and so this reality about what's happening in the United States doesn't come as a surprise to us. We know that the demographics in this country are very diverse, and this is just kind of for the demographers basically paint the picture in terms of racial and ethnic diversity. The Asian Pacific Islander and Latino populations are going to triple. The black population is expected to double. And the Anglo population is barely going to be able to maintain its own numbers. And that's without any kind of, changes in our current policies and practices. But this is our future. And so the question is, if that's where we're going to be 2050, do we wait to midnight, December 31st, 2049, to do something about it? Or do we recognize that the time is now to prepare ourselves, given the kind of our desire to meet the needs of, again, your population, how you've defined them. And so I want to start with the definition of diversity, because I think it's important for us to recognize that, some of the things that may not immediately register about differences are also important. It's not just about race and gender, it's not just about age and ethnicity, but all of these other ways, marital status, religion, sexual orientation, disabilities, that differentiates individuals from one another. And the reason why I like to start with this definition is because everybody can see themselves as different in at least one category. And so that becomes an opportunity for us to have a conversation about, which of those differences might actually be relevant in terms of me trying to connect to the populations that I'm focusing in on, I'm interested in, and also that I represent as an individual. The second, I think another kind of a critical definition for us to think about is values, right? How we kind of evaluate or appraise the state of the world says something about our values. We believe something's good or bad because of our values. We believe something is desirable or not desirable because of our values. And we don't wear our values on our sleeves, but whenever we come into the room, we bring those values with us. And so we have to start thinking about, how can some of those different values maybe manifest in some of the kind of interactions that we're having with the populations of interest for us. And so here's just an example, and I apologize for the quality. It's not as clean as I would like it, but we'll talk a little bit about that too. But this is really just talking about some very real concerns in terms of, what do you believe is the basic nature of people? Do you think they're good, or do you think they're basically evil? And just think about what would happen when two people in the room are at polar opposites in terms of that dimension. I think everybody's good and will always do the right thing. You're thinking that everybody's evil and they can't be trusted. But, oh, my goodness, we're supposed to come to a collective decision of what's going to happen. And so this is just, again, to get you thinking about all these different ways that, we may be unintentionally not connecting simply because our values and expectations may be different. The time dimension. In some communities, when somebody says we're going to start at 10 o'clock, you're expected to be there at 10 o'clock. In other communities, if somebody says we're going to start at 10 o'clock, that begins the negotiation. And so, well, that means I've got an hour. I can get there. If I get there an hour too late, it won't be late. But again, if I don't know that, then I'm always wondering why they're coming late, not really recognizing that how they view time in and of itself is different. The next slide is just really talking about going from the individual to kind of a more global kind of a presentation to recognize that there are differences, kind of these in this particular case, Eastern versus Western, in terms of these kind of core societal values. And again, it's the same kind of thing. The grinding that may take place when you're very used to dealing with a unitary decision maker, and then somebody else wants to bring the entire family in to make a decision, or you're convinced that it's all about doing what we can to change the individual, and we're recognizing that, look, the family is part of the calculation. If they're not brought in, then some of the things that you're trying to do may not go very far. And so I just kind of wanted to start the conversation because, again, these are things that when I talk about trying to make the invisible visible, values are invisible, but they're having a critical kind of impact on some of the metrics that we're trying to move, some of the communities that we're trying to move. And the same thing is true about world values. Excuse me, I mean worldviews. So what you can immediately see is that at the core of this worldview are a set of values and beliefs which kind of work together to form the worldview. So that's why I wanted to start with the value statement, to understand that at my core there are some things that are driving me. And the worldview says that some of the other experiences that have happened to me over time are also kind of driving me. So for example, the family that I was born into, or the family that I marry into, has an influence over how I view the world. You know, the lessons that I learned from my parents has an influence over the way that I look at the world. The economics of survival. I mean, if you've never been hungry, or if you've always had your own transportation, it doesn't occur to you that somebody may be late because the bus, you know, was full and they had to wait on the next bus, or they're not taking their meds because they've got to get groceries. And so this is, again, recognizing that there's a different frame of reference that may be kind of the haves and the have-nots that we need to understand. I've already mentioned this issue of power and authority in the family, and again, I think most of us are aware of the influence that religion and religious practices can have on the communities that we serve. Other elements of the worldview, again, this idea of our connections in the community. We have to recognize that for some of the populations that you may serve, they may be very isolated, and so how do you begin to help people that may feel very kind of disconnected from the broader communities that you're trying to address? This issue of assimilation, again, there's evidence that new immigrants have go through a process, and the longer immigrant families are here, they become more and more Americanized. But again, what are some of the trade-offs that are a result of that, and how do we begin to tap into that? The focus for what we're dealing with today is in terms of what do people assume is the reason why they're sick or the reason why they're well, and to begin to understand, if I believe that you're having a seizure because you have epilepsy, and you believe you're having a seizure because you're spirit possessed, then we've got a lot of ground to cover in terms of trying to make sure that we can do basically take care of your needs as to the best of our ability. And then the last one, I think most of us are very kind of aware of language and bilingual abilities, but I also want to add the issue, it's not just kind of English to Spanish or Farsi or some other language. It may be academic to community language that also requires a translation, or your advanced degree to someone that has a 5th grade education that also has to do with language. Again, am I sending the message in the way that you need to receive it or that you can understand it? I like to present this slide because some of you may be familiar with it. They both got media attention for very different reasons. The purple and gold Laker tennis shoes were an Adidas product that created a very negative backlash against the organization, because it never occurred to them that one of their key demographics would look at those tennis shoes and say, that looks like a shackle. I don't know what it's supposed to be. But for an African American who comes out of a slave tradition, it looked like a tennis shoe that has chains on it, and so these immediate images of slavery, they were pulled from the market, luckily. But the sad part about it is that they made it through so many different points in the organization before somebody said, you know, this is not appropriate. On the other side, you have Nike, our Just Do It friends, who basically were celebrated by the gay and lesbian community for using the rainbow in a tennis shoe, and to basically say that they are celebrating the gay community by using it, and again, using it in an appropriate fashion. They weren't sending mixed messages. Again, the community has embraced the idea of a rainbow, and so again, this is getting positive feedback. So again, I just wanted to make the point that, again, some of you, when you first saw this slide, may have just thought this is just a couple of tennis shoes and not thought anything of it. But what I want you to understand is that for communities that, you know, come through a different set of experience, a different worldview, then those tennis shoes, even those tennis shoes, may be sending a message. And again, don't want to go too far into that, but I want you to understand how subtle some of the things can be that can get some of our relationships off track. I want to change the lens now, and this is says clinical discretion. But what it's really talking about is the process by which we take in information, make an interpretation of that intervention, that message, and then propose some type of intervention. And I hope what you see is that there are a lot of different points in the process where things can go wrong, right? I mean, that we have to recognize that even though two sets of people looking at the same information may have a very different interpretation of what they're seeing. And again, part of it has to do with that worldview. Part of it has to do with some unconscious bias. And so the real issue is, again, to get us kind of thinking about, you know, how many of these potential kind of handoff points or transition points are we kind of thinking about as we try to develop programs for, and this, I want you to understand this very clearly, develop programs for where people are and not where we think they are, right? So developing programs based on where we think people are may be very costly and ineffective because, again, we're designing programs for a future, not the present. And so I want us to kind of think about that. I mean, how are we kind of checking in to make sure that the information that we're gathering on our respective communities, we're getting an appropriate interpretation, and in some cases, multiple interpretations of what the data is telling us. And so this kind of gets to the kind of broader conversation around this issue of culture. And again, this is a pretty common definition. Again, this idea of can everybody, am I coming through okay? I hear a little bit static. Can you still hear me? Hello? Is anyone having trouble here? Hello?
Hi, can you hear us?
Yeah. Did I
We
go
can
out?
hear you.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. I just heard a lot of static and so I just want to make sure. Okay. I'll keep going. Sorry about that. But this, again, is one of the kind of classic definitions of culture. Again, this whole idea in terms of patterns of behavior, you know, customs that we see, relationships, expected, you know, customs and values of different types of groups. But I think what's important to kind of, in addition to everything else, is to recognize that it's those things that we're transmitting to succeeding generations. So we're also talking about some intergenerational issues that may be relevant for the communities that you're trying to serve. This is, again, something that I think is pretty common to kind of think about. The fact that most of our interactions in this iceberg happen above the surface level. We make assessments of people based on how they dress, how they look, you know, the languages that they speak. And what this wants you to kind of think about is there are a whole host of other factors that may be influencing the behavior that we see. And so how much of this below the surface information do we have? An example that I like to use is eye behavior. In some communities, eye behavior and maintaining eye contact is a signal of trust and that and integrity. In other communities, maintaining eye contact is seen as a direct challenge, and so someone maintaining contact would be seen as a threat. And so what happens when a human resources person that's used to maintaining eye contact as a symbol of trust comes against someone who's used to being challenged with eye contact, then you have this disconnect, and someone may not get a job simply because they don't, the HR person may not understand that in my culture, eye contact means something else. And so just to kind of think about that. Yes, it's one more thing that we may have to bring into our calculations, but again, ultimately we're trying to understand the people that we serve better, our team members, our coworkers better, and so again, it's maybe some of these nuanced things that may help us to do that. And so I want to kind of talk a little bit about this issue of humility, cultural humility, this whole idea of just kind of having a commitment to a kind of a lifelong process, which basically says, I'm going to keep learning about the populations that I serve. I'm going to keep learning about the communities that are looking to me for help, or the communities that I work in, because again, we can't. We need to recognize that sometimes our assumptions, with no poor, mean-spirited or ill intention, may lead to some negative outcomes. And so I want to walk quickly through this continuum, which basically talks about, that we need to recognize that both individuals and organizations are someplace on this continuum, and how do we begin to walk through it. And so as you can see, you go from destructiveness to proficiency, and again, I'm going to walk through these very quickly, and then we will kind of talk a little bit more about kind of how all this maps onto your definitions of health and wellness, and also this whole idea of leading change. And so in the first stage, you're talking about cultural destructiveness, where you see the difference and you want to eliminate it. We're talking about genocide. When one group says that they want to make another group disappear off the planet, what we're really talking about is this idea of cultural destructiveness. Any difference is bad. It has to be annihilated or eliminated. Cultural incapacity says that I see the difference and I make it wrong. So, for example, you know, why can't you speak English? Everybody that works here speaks English. Or, you know, why do we have to have translation? I mean, again, if everybody would just, you know, speak this language, we'd be a lot better off. Again, see the difference, make it wrong. Again, incapacity. This is the one that I think, in my experiences, has generated a lot of controversy for me personally, because it says culture blindness, see the difference, act like you don't. And there's a part of us that likes to believe that we live in a colorblind society. And the reason why I reject that is because I am an African American woman. And for you to say that you don't see color means that you don't see what I see every day. And so to see the difference and act like you don't means that you don't have to deal with all the issues that may have been different in terms of me getting into the room versus you getting into the room. And so we're kind of disconnected from the beginning. So I want you to kind of think about that as well. Pre-competence says you see the difference, respond to it inappropriately. Again, small things that you're trying to do, you're recognizing that, you know, someone may come from a different cultural background, someone may be from a different generation. And again, you see the difference, but the kinds of things you do, you know, may cause this disconnect, may cause this grinding, may make people very, very uncomfortable. And so this idea, you're moving in the right direction, but again, like everything else, we need a little bit more practice. And then competence says you see the difference and you understand the difference it makes. I understand that, you know, not having English as your primary language may mean something when you come into this building and don't see signs that are reflective of your interests. I understand what it means when, you know, if you're trying to provide care to kind of multiple generations of your family, again, and kind of being in the center of that. I understand that they may make it difficult, you know, for you to maybe meet some of the meetings that we're trying to do. And so again, I want to make it clear to you that I think both diversity and culture are broader terms than we sometimes use them, and so I want to kind of make that part of my presentation. And then proficiency, or some people call it advanced competency, really begins to understand that it's not just that things are different, but I fundamentally see that there is value in terms of having multiple perspectives looking at the same issue. There is value in terms of taking the time to ask that next question that gets people more engaged in some of the work that we're trying to do, make people feel that they're more welcomed in terms of some of the things that we're trying to do. And so again, it's this whole idea of me, again, recognizing that I am dealing with a diverse set of actors, I'm dealing with a diverse set of needs, wants, desires, I'm dealing with a set of different values. And so really, if I'm trying to maximize either the work of my team, if I'm trying to maximize the work of my organization, if I'm trying to have the biggest possible impact on the communities of interest, you know, how far have I gone in terms of trying to understand what may be driving some of the behavior that I'm seeing right now. And so that leads me to kind of this whole idea of when we start talking about health, right? And so I think the WHO's definition is kind of one that's seen as a classic. Health is not merely the absence of disease, but the state of physical, mental, and social well-being. That it is, if you look at that definition, it is much more holistic, right, than just, you know, having needing to see a doctor or not needing to see a doctor. It really is much more holistic. And then the Ottawa definition is kind of even more idealized, if you will. Health is a resource for living. I mean, all those things that make it possible for you to enjoy life, right? I mean, peace, shelter. And again, some people would look at that and also recognize that there's some elements of the social determinants of health. There are other things that are outside me as an individual that will have a fundamental impact on whether or not I feel healthy. And then also this issue of wellness. This is one definition. Wellness is a multidimensional state, again describing the existence of positive health in an individual, exemplified by a quality of life and a sense of well-being. But the bigger part, again, I should have started there, is this whole idea of a process. It involves awareness, making choices, and again, this idea of success. And I think it's important to look at those a little bit more in detail, because the first thing is this issue of a process. That means that no matter, going back to what I said earlier, you start with where people are, not where you think they should be. And so if we just begin the process there, then we recognize that maybe a year from now they could be where, ideally they should be. But again, it's a work in process. So long as we keep that framework in mind, there's always the possibility for improvement. Again, this issue of awareness, I'm going to spend a little bit more time about that a little bit later, but to recognize that in many instances there may be blindness. We may not be sensitive to some of the things that are going on around us. We may not be, running into barriers in part because we're assuming that everyone's reading from the same page. But again, it's also saying that we are actively engaged in seeking information about how we can improve. It says no matter where we are, no matter what our metrics are, no matter how well we think we're doing, is there some place where we could do better? And again, being sensitive and open to messages that say that maybe there are places where we could be doing better. Again, choices, again, I think it's self-explanatory, but we need to recognize that when we lay the options in front of people, they may not select what we would want them to select, but are we willing to let them make that selection and to deal with the consequences of those selections? Again, that's something that we have to think about, because part of the work that I do is really around expanding people's choice set, but I'm not assuming that automatically they're going to choose the better options, but at least we're trying to introduce them to some better options. Then that last one, again, I think is also important. Success is determined based on how people define success. So from your individual group projects, you've got to be thinking about what is it that is success for us, right? What is our collective definition of success? Because that is what we want the world to hold us accountable for. And the reason why, it's important for us to think about that, because again, if I think it's A and you think it's B and we never had the conversation, if A happens, you may celebrate, and if A happens for me, looking for B, it may not be a good day for me. And so really to kind of get ourselves thinking about, what does that really mean in practice? And the other thing that I want you to kind of think about, just like we had kind of multiple factors that may have influenced our values, I want us to understand that even when we talk about wellness, it may mean something very different based on who we're talking to. And so that's why, again, I focused on this kind of issue of key concepts, because if I'm having a conversation about medical wellness and all I'm thinking about is my finances, then we have this disconnect. And so there has to be an opportunity for us to figure out exactly, okay, what are we talking about today? And again, begin the conversation there, as opposed to me assuming that because I'm focusing on medical wellness or mental wellness, everybody else in the room is too. And so again, part of the challenge, again, part of that role of the leader is, again, to make sure that we're asking the questions that clarify kind of key concepts to the other parties in the room. And so that gets to the first kind of opportunity for interactions for us. So how do the definitions of health and wellness compare with your own definitions and with the definition you receive from your community partners? And I think that we've set things up so that we can get responses from the group. And so I'm going to ask that you be unmuted and called on so I can kind of hear your thoughts in response to that question.
Okay. So with regards to this first question, are there any folks who have their hands raised? Or can you raise your hand or please pose a question? Okay. Vandana will go ahead and unmute you since you have a question.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I was wondering if I should type it in or just say so. This is great, great topic that we're talking about. I just wanted to add that two things, one comment and one question. So when you talk about wellness, it's great that you have different dimensions of wellness, because clearly it's kind of it's a holistic approach, and it's not just one thing. Just because you don't have a cold today doesn't mean you're okay, Also to recognize that, wellness means different things in different cultures, like the perception of wellness. We know, I think the physical thing is a much broader thing, but when if you go back a slide, you say spiritual wellness, emotional wellness, intellectual wellness. I think it varies a lot from culture to culture, and having that awareness and that understanding of how different people view it differently, and just being mindful of that, I think is very, I think it's important. And I also want to point out that I think a year and a half ago, CIMH did a great training. It was an all-day health equity training, or something. It was called a training, but half of the day they covered culture competency, kind of cultural issues related to culture competence. And so not just being, my point being that not just being aware, like you said in a couple of slides earlier, don't act like you don't see it, or something I think you said something just because you're aware, don't pretend that you didn't see the difference, recognize the difference kind of thing, but also knowing what is the difference. So, cultures may not know each other, I may not know what another person's cultural sensitivity is. So some kind of training around that. I remember CIMH did that. This was a wonderful conference because Native American, different groups presented. And I learned so much because, Native American, for example, presented what's sensitive to their culture, what are the things that they're very fine-tuned to, or why drumming is so healing for them, and just having that knowledge is, I think, very empowering. So I just wanted to say that. That's it.
Thank you, Vandana. And then we have,
So thank you, Vandana, for saying that. I think this is Christy, by the way. I think I know what conference you're talking about, perhaps, and I wanted to just give a quick plug to let everyone know, and we'll send you guys this information as well, that CIMH is putting on another conference this coming May 30th, which we anticipate will be in the Southern California area, which may be similar to what you're describing. So looking at community-defined practices across 4 different ethnic populations. And so we'll have an opportunity, I think, to address some of the things you're speaking to. So just wanted to mention that while that was fresh.
okay, so now we have Sunit, who's had her hand raised. Go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead, Sunit. Sunit.
Hello, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Okay, there's so much time. Okay, so it's pretty much what Vandana said, that health is defined by each community and individual. It's how you define your culture, how you're accustomed to one culture, and the wealth and the health access, all that. As you said in the definition, it's not because of absence of disease, but also wellness in a holistic way, means spiritually, financially, and so socially is very important. And for one of those not met, then there's no health, because that's who you become as a person, a whole person, that you're accustomed to certain culture and a certain expectation and certain ritual, as Vandana mentioned as examples of Indian. So health is based on what you're accustomed to. So what you receive from your environment and what you receive from individually from your parents, that's what health is to as a community and coming from that population.
Thank you. And then we have Sandra, who has a question. Go ahead, Sandra. Oh, no, I think we still can't hear you, Sandra. So if you can write in your question, and then we can go ahead and share it with Dr. Lewis.
Hey, I just wanted to say that I appreciate the comments that have been made, and it really, I mean, it just kind of reinforces, kind of the message that I want to kind of communicate today, and it really is around, what what I don't know about the communities that I serve can hurt them, right? I mean, not because of being mean-spirited, but simply because I didn't know that it was an issue. And so since I want to be someone that's seen as a trusted partner in the community, then I've got to figure out, going back to what I said from the very beginning, what are the differences that really make a difference? Because some differences may not matter, but if there are issues that are fundamentally going to signal that you're respected, that you're trusted, that I care, then I need to know what those things are. And so what are we doing to find out what those kind of non-negotiables are for some of the communities that we serve and represent? Is the other question in?
No, it's not in yet.
Okay.
Let's try to get some folks. How about Janice, who has a group of folks over there in Tri-City? Janice, hi. Who else is with you today? Hi, Janice. Oh, I guess they are.
Okay.
Oh. Do you guys have any comment to this question here? Oh. Okay, I'm going to mute you guys then, since I'm not hearing anything. Then we have, I don't know, let's see, how about Luis? Luis, any comments?
No questions. No.
Okay.
Hi. Yeah.
Hello.
How about Monica from Merced?
No questions.
Okay. And Sandra, I see that you're trying to send us a question, but all it says is hi. So. Okay, Dr. Lewis, I think you can go ahead.
Okay, so I want to.
So she said, looking at the slide on different aspects of wellness, is it possible for one aspect to take on greater importance based on what the person has experienced at a given moment in time?
I mean, absolutely. That's why I've focused in on kind of the humility piece or the listening piece, because it really is around, again, I keep saying meeting people where they are versus where we think they are. And so, yes, you may have been fine financially the last time we met, but if I just got a pink slip, that's where my energy is right now. And so you need to meet me there as opposed to someplace else. And so, again, it really is putting the onus on you to have that level of sensitivity to the audiences that you're working with, both in terms of your peers and also the clients or the communities that you're working in. Because, again, it really is that connection that gives you the credibility, that gives you the trust, that ultimately will kind of lead to the impact that you're trying to have. Does that answer your question?
Well, Sandra is not able to speak. So
Okay.
We'll see if she responds, but.
Okay. All right. Well, like I say, I think.
So why don't you go ahead? I think we're ready to.
She said, yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. All right. So again, I wanted to kind of to basically move from setting the stage for kind of these broader conversations, because for me it really is around putting the focus on you as a leader and your role kind of in this initiative that you're involved in, your role in terms of the communities that you're being asked to kind of think about. And so this definition really talks about the fact that real leadership means that you have an appreciation or knowledge of what's driving people, what's motivating people, but also the skills for working with people. Because again, you don't assume that just because you know something's wrong, you automatically have the tools to address it. And so it really is around that connection between, knowing the issues that are relevant, but also being willing to commit some of your own personal capacity, capabilities, interests to actually getting it done. And it says the effectiveness with which these tasks are carried out, again, depends on how able your skill set, or how your the extent of your skill set in terms of, again, helping people define these problems, and again, recognize that part of what you're trying to do is help people solve some of their own problems. And so I want.
Dr. Lewis, we
Yes,
have a hand raised. So Dr. Sanai has a question.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Sanai.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
You have
I know I did not. I don't know. No, I don't have. I don't know why it's going off by itself, but I don't have a question. Sorry.
Okay, perfect. I'll go ahead and mute you again.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. So again, this, going back to this issue of leadership, I want you to kind of think about it as a journey. Again, we're on the road trying to get to whatever we think is important for realizing the aim that you've identified. It's relational. You're not a leader if you don't have at least one person following you. That's pretty basic stuff. And then this idea of having a vision or a dream, if you will, or a noble cause, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But again, what I want you to kind of think about is that if I'm put in a position where I'm the voice of the work that we're doing, you know, how do I talk about the work? How do I develop relationships for the work? And how do I get kind of other people excited about the work? So I think it's important for us to recognize that when I talk about leadership, I'm not talking about necessarily a title. You should be able to lead wherever you are. You can also follow, again, to recognize that, again, if you're new to the area and someone else has more credibility, you know, let them take the lead on it. Again, maybe you get the lead to do the lead next time. But I want us to really kind of understand, how do we kind of maximize the various relationships that we're responsible for or are part of at any given time. I also want you to kind of think about, again, this is another situation where you have to focus on the process. It doesn't happen overnight. I know we have our goals and our metrics and our SMART objectives and all of those sorts of things, but we got to really think about, you know, am I committed to doing the hard work? You know, how long am I willing to invest? If I don't get change overnight, you know, am I willing to basically recognize that the effort is worth it and to keep moving? I want to make it very clear that a big part of my message really is about the individual. I mean, I say very frankly that the only thing I control is the real estate that I stand on. And so that's another way of saying that all I control is me. Everything else I've got to get negotiated, got to get help with other people to believe it, to get it on board. And so again, for me, this idea of, I start as a leader beginning with my own self-mastery, my own kind of knowing who I am and where I'm trying to go. Because again, it's those things I'm going to be using to get other people engaged in the work, to get other people on board, and if necessary, to get maybe other people to change their behavior, and again, ultimately improve not just myself, but again, some of the communities that we're trying to connect with. So I want you to kind of think about this idea of, as I said earlier, you lead where you are. So, for example, you may not be the executive director, you may not have the big office, but you have a network, right? And you have people that look to you for advice, looking to you for answers, and also, you know, how do you begin to use those networks in a way that allows you to, again, transform the communities that you're working with, whether it's you know, the different geographies that you're trying to do, whether you're talking about the the gay lesbian community, if you're talking about an immigrant population. Again, what are you doing, kind of trying to help identify some of the leaders in those communities that may also be relevant for helping to get the work done? I mean, who are the seen as the trusted resources? And again, how are you connecting to those trusted resources? When I talked about this issue of the worldview, I talked about the impact that our experiences have on us. I think it's important that we recognize that if you're dealing with communities that have experienced violence and trauma, then those experiences are, you know, driving part of what you see. But again, it's like if you're so used to dysfunction, you know, how do you get somebody talking about, you know, why the stress may be overwhelming or why the outcomes may not be optimal? People need to understand that, you know, those things are influencing them, and we've got to find a way to get them to talk about those experiences, because again, right now, you know, if you don't have a place to process that, you continue business as usual, and again, people continue to kind of maybe I won't say hide, but really just not be able to reflect on how they're different because of those experiences. And that's really what we need to do, a little bit more kind of processing in terms of, what do these experiences mean for this community, and again, to document that story. I think every one of us who desires to, again, going to this being a leadership initiative or leadership institute, to kind of really think about, who am I as a leader, and what does that really mean for me as an individual? So just some basic processing questions. Again, for me, going back to what I said earlier, my leadership starts with me, and if I don't know these answers for myself, then how can I begin to direct, help others navigate, help others get on track, again, if I'm still struggling with some of these issues for myself? Again, who are you? Where are you now? Where do you want to go? How do you know you're going to get there? And then what will you do when you get there? Again, we're going to work through each of these a little bit more, but just kind of think about what these mean kind of on your day-to-day kind of operations, right? Very basic in terms of, when you're asked to put your resume together, one of the things that you put together, people ask you what are your strengths and weaknesses, and so that means that I know something about myself. I know answers to those questions. Again, it's this idea of I know who I am, not just who people think that I am. And again, I think it's important to recognize that those may be very different. And so what's your level of comfort with the fact that those things may be different? I mean, it's the same thing with some of the communities that you're in. I mean, people may have very different perspectives of the communities that you're serving, and so how do you think it feels to be misunderstood and perhaps misrepresented in some of those kind of conversations? So again, you want to kind of be able to be comfortable, again, in getting people to talk about some of those issues. This idea, again, challenging yourself. Again, I think it's important that you recognize, stretch opportunities. When my kind of introduction was read, it talked about me being very comfortable, making people uncomfortable. When I get in a situation that I'm not familiar with, or when somebody says something and I don't know the right answer, it may make me uncomfortable. But what we need to understand is that that's a challenge, that's an opportunity for growth. And how do I get other people to think about that, and so that that initial discomfort doesn't become something that stops all communication and forward progress, but it becomes an opportunity for us to go, okay, let's explore that a little bit more, right? Because again, it's a learning opportunity for all of us, but not if people aren't willing to take the challenge and would rather park it and kind of maybe have a conversation at another time. Try to keep the momentum going, and again, recognize the challenge. It may have to come from you sometimes. I think the last bullet is kind of self-explanatory. People recognize when you're fake. Again, when you're dealing with communities which are feeling which may be disadvantaged, which may be disenfranchised, they can spot, fakes and phonies very quickly. They may not say it, but they know whether or not you're really interested in helping the community or collecting data on the community. They may not be the same thing. And just, again, people need to know that you're there to help, that you're there to listen, and do we communicate that in an authentic way. Going back to some of these map onto the issue of wellness that we talked about previously, right? Personally, emotionally, physically, socially, professionally. Again, it's like, do we know some of those answers? If we had to take the test right now, could we give answers to basically what space we're in right now? I mean, is it where you pictured yourself? I don't know how old the people on the phone or, excuse me, in the webinar are. There goes to my technology piece. But again, we all had some aspirations. And so the question is, I mean, are those in alignment? Because again, it makes it easier when we know that we're doing the kinds of things that we, on some level, expected to do, that we feel valued in what we do, that we feel recognized in what we do. This issue of evaluation, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. I do a lot of assessment work because, again, I think it's important that people have a chance to kind of reflect on where they are, do some evaluations of where they are. Again, being honest, I'm grading my own test, so I'm not trying to impress myself about where I am, but I'm trying to be honest because, again, if I want to get to the next level, I've got to be honest about the level I'm on right now. I'm a big, all of the folks that study adult learning focus on the fact that reflection is kind of a higher opportunity for learning, and so we should be doing it both individually. We should be doing it for our team. We should be doing it in our communities because, again, it's allowing us to kind of think about what we've done, what difference it made before we go into something else. We can really kind of talk about what were the learnings that happened, what were the changes that were made. But again, if we don't take the time to do that, we may miss an opportunity to kind of, again, grow at another level. This last one is me all day. It's like I tell all of my students, I prefer the truth. I may not like it. And so if the numbers aren't good, if the things that you're telling me are hard to listen to, that's okay, because again, I know where you are, not where I think you ought to be, and that's going to help me do what I need to do to make sure that we're doing a better job in terms of meeting your needs, or that we're doing a better job in terms of responding to some of the issues that are being identified in the community. Again, this idea of, do we make it easy for people to give us information, good, bad, or indifferent, or do we present an image that basically says, the only thing I want to hear is good news, and if you don't bring me that, then don't come by my office, and don't bring it to the group, don't bring it to the team, don't bring it to the community. But people need to know. Some of the work that you're doing may be harder than you expected it to be. Be honest about that, because everybody needs to know that, because, again, you have to manage expectations on some level. Again, you can't be everything all at once. Again, it is a process, and you want people to know honestly where you are in that process. So again, this idea of big picture, I know sometimes in the day-to-day kind of operations, it's hard to stay big picture when you're kind of trying to meet the metrics and just what's in front of you. But again, it is a bigger issue. I'm going to talk a little bit more about noble causes and core values in a minute. But this idea of alignment, is what I'm passionate about what I actually get to do on a day-to-day basis. If those things are aligned, then I should expect good things to happen, because I'm being asked to do the kinds of things that I believe that I was meant to do. This is just, again, someone's, a list of possible leadership qualities. And again, you can kind of see several different things that I think that I've already kind of talked a little bit about. I want to kind of highlight this issue of active listening. And again, going back to the assignment about talking to people in the community about their definitions of health and wellness, people heard that differently, and so it had a consequence, or it had an impact in terms of what you turned in and what you didn't turn in. But it really is an appreciation for, I need to make sure that I'm listening, paying attention long enough to hear what's being said, and not just long enough to come up with my response. Sometimes we zone out when we've got, again, enough information to respond, but the community may be telling us some things different. Our coworkers may be telling us something different, and if we stop listening, we may miss the opportunity. The same thing can be said for two-way communication. The people, the groups that we're working with, and the teams that we're working with should feel that, when they are speaking, I am listening. And I should also have that same level of comfort that when I'm saying something, someone else is listening, right? So this idea of a two-way communication. Every kind of effective communication has a sender, a receiver, and a message. And we've got to be very sensitive to how we're doing, in each of those areas. Am I being very straightforward in the messages that I'm sending? Am I taking the time to listen and not just jump to judgment? Am I making sure the message, again, is sensitive to the audience? And again, am I thinking about myself as an effective messenger? I think the projects, the groups, each of you has aims, right? I mean, are we clear in what our aims are, both individually? Are we clear about our aims as it relates to our group? Are we clear about our aims and expectations as it relates to Healy? And what I want you to kind of think about, again, is like we talked about alignment. If I'm expecting A and you give me Z, I want to know what happened, right? And so it's really an appreciation for how we're taking the time to make sure that we all understand what's important about the work that we do. Maybe we don't agree on everything, but what is that kind of core set of values or core set of issues that we're trying to maximize in the work that we're trying to do? Because that's what should be communicated at every opportunity. We should be letting people know that this is what we're about. Yes, we're about other things, but we're all pulling in this direction with this group at this time in this community because we want to do A, B, and C. And so, again, people need to understand that this is where we're trying to go, and this is why, right? What is it that means so much to you? people need to understand that that's what the projects are about. And again, if there's um, confusion or lack of clarity on that, then we need to make a commitment to trying to do what we can to get everybody on the same page. Do we have enough flexibility to get everybody on the same page? Again, I mentioned this issue. A lot of the focus that I make is on self. I have to be disciplined. I've got to recognize that I'm the one that has to show up. I need to appreciate the fact that if this disparity, if this problem has existed for 50 years, it's probably not going to just disappear because I showed up. I've got to be willing to recognize that some of the things that we do may be incremental, but if so long as there's movement, that should be at least a starting point. This issue of going beside your boundaries means, again, that I recognize that I have limits. I recognize that I have constraints, and so I'm willing to basically be transparent about that, and also basically have others help me to get beyond those boundaries. I may have those blind spots, but if you're willing to help me develop, then maybe I can move past those blind spots. None of us makes it through without making mistakes, and so the question is, what do we do with those mistakes? Do we hide them, or do we basically say, look, let's kind of learn from this and kind of move on? This idea of what's my corrective action plan? If I had this great idea about what we were going to do in the community and nobody else got excited about it, or if the community did get excited about it, okay, what's my corrective action plan to make sure that the next time they see me or the next time they see our team, they recognize that we heard them, that we took the message, and this is kind of our plan for getting things back on track. All right? This issue of lifelong learning, again, is just an appreciation for the fact that we live in a kind of an information-rich society, and it's happening at a faster and faster pace. And so the real issue is, do I make a commitment to staying current? Do I make a commitment to staying relevant? Because, again, I'm trying to lead a project or a group. I'm trying to lead a community into another direction or another field of interest, and so I've got to basically commit to broadening my experiences, to again be willing to take risks, do things that I haven't learned before or done before, and again this idea of learning from my experiences. Again, we don't like to think about failures again, but again we have to recognize that part of our ability, part of our personal growth and development depends on not just how we handle our successes, but also how we handle our failure. Again, you've got to have a plan for getting there, and this is what I mentioned earlier. Each of us, again, it's like for the various teams that are involved in this work, I mean, what are you thinking about in terms of where do you want to end up? What do you want to 2 years, 4 years, 5 years down the road? What do you want to be able to say about the community and the work that you've done? Again, what kind of a platform are you willing to put in place in order to make that happen? Yes, it's a personal kind of a choice, this vision piece, but any vision in order to be realized is going to have supporters and have to have people buy into it. And so again, what's the message that you see forward? And again, I mentioned Nelson Mandela. We're celebrating his life even as we speak, and so it's just kind of an appreciation that you have to be willing to, again, it is something that you're willing to put all of your best efforts in terms of kind of moving forward. I talked about core values before. Again, I'm just trying to find ways to connect to the people in the room, because again, if those core values are driving you as an individual, then I need to know what matters most to you, because that's where we're going to connect. And how can we develop a project around an appreciation for differences in core values, but again, that show maybe some respect, maybe your passion for justice, I don't know, but the bottom line is that what is it that we say we agree on, that we will be messages for, that we will basically embrace, again, in order to try to move the needle in the communities that we're concerned about. Because again, nobody sees my values, but all the decisions that I'm making, whether consciously or unconsciously, are being driven by those values. And the same thing about the other people in the room. How do you get people to be honest with you about what matters most to them? Because once I can get you to talk about what matters most to you, I can begin to talk about programs and practices that we can actually do together, because I know that I've got you and I've got your commitment, because you've seen that I'm committed to what's important to you as well. I don't think it can be said enough that we've all got to think of ourselves as effective communicators. I work in healthcare, hospitals. Hospitals are spending millions of dollars to an organization to teach them how to talk to one another, right? And so that says something about, you know, what's lacking in our current communication practices. So it really is an appreciation, this idea of ultimately at the goal of communication is sharing something. Sharing my perspective, sharing my aspirations, sharing my needs. And so if I don't use words appropriately, then what just happened is that I've missed an opportunity to get you excited about the work. I missed an opportunity to get you more aware of what's going on with me and what's going on in the community. And so it really isn't, you can't be dismissive of poor communication. Again, people need to know that that the words that you use, you mean, that they're relevant, that you've taken time to figure out that when I say health, it means one thing over in this neighborhood and it means something else in the other neighborhood. But wherever I am, I know how to talk about it in a way that the people are still on board. And so it's critical, again, it's this idea of taking on my role as a leader, particularly as it relates to communication, because again, the messages that I send both in oral and written form, again, are going to say something about how people view our the credibility of our efforts, the credibility of each of us individually as team members, and the credibility of us collectively as kind of change agents, if you will, in some of the communities that we're trying to serve. Will the people that you're trying to connect with think you're genuine? Again, because you are in part a very effective communicator. I put this here because you're working together in teams, and so again, I wanted to, just like we talked about process or stages before, I wanted to appreciate that there are processes, right? And just in terms of developing groups and teams, right? In the forming stage, you're trying to get to know one another, and we're testing behavior. Storming, stage 2, where we're having disagreements. You're not as nice as I thought you were. We're having conflicts maybe. Norming means that we're getting to the point where we're recognizing that we have a common vision. We've wrestled through some of the tough issues, and now we believe we have a common vision, and actually we can actually get some things done, right? Accomplishment. So I wanted you to kind of recognize, and you can grade your own test and where you feel that your group or team is, but to recognize that the things that I think the main message here is that the things that you may be going through right now are not unique. They're part of the process, and the question is, are you going to be honest in the process such that you get to that point where you are a high-performing team and not just a group of people who happen to be asked to work together, but a group of people who fundamentally can do some stuff that's transformative in the communities that you're interested in. And again, this is just talking about some of the things in terms of the work that you do. Norm had talked about managing expectations. Again, if I can't give you 50 hours, I need to tell you that, right? And so as opposed to you just assuming that because you gave 50 hours, I can give 50 hours too. Laying out expectations about how we're going to treat one another, what we should expect from one another is critical. Let's not just assume that because, you know, I've always done it this way, that you're going to do it this way as well. And so just kind of working through it. Same thing in terms of being clear in terms of roles and within the various team members. Everybody might not be doing the same thing, but at least we have kind of clear idea in terms of what can be expected from one another. Because again, this says organizational change, but it could also be, again, changes about some of these broader issues. We're trying to, if we didn't think the change was necessary, again, some of these efforts that we're trying to do to bring people to think differently about the systems that they operate in, to think differently about the communities that they operate in. Fundamentally, we're doing that because we think that there's something about the status quo of current practices that could be better. And so we've got to get people thinking about what can we do to make some of the changes happen. Again, they won't happen overnight, and they may not happen without an instigator. And part of what I'm asking you is that, are you being asked to take on that responsibility? And if so, you know, how are you handling this role in terms of leading some of these changes? And so I want to make it very clear that part of what we have to deal with is that we have to recognize that people may be in very different spaces, organizations may be in very different spaces, and again, until we recognize that, we're not going to be very effective in terms of the interventions that we may propose or the approaches that we might want to adopt to address some of those differences. And so I put this up so you can kind of understand that we're working across different levels, right? And they are all connected, right? It's like as an individual, I am influenced by the organizations that I happen to spend most of my time in, that I may have to go in for some services. They have an impact on me. Organizations are also influenced by society. We don't have the luxury of saying that what happens in Sacramento or what happens in Washington, D.C. doesn't kind of influence me. And so it really is kind of an appreciation that these levels or these domains are connected. And so part of my ability to lead change depends on my ability to kind of navigate across these different domains. And so again, this idea that we all need to be aware where we are, and this says cultural competence, but it really is around this whole discussion around kind of health and wellness. Again, my own kind of appreciation for my own attitudes and beliefs, because again, when I come into the room, I can either be a help to the conversation, or I can be a hindrance and kind of maybe have a negative impact on what could have been a very promising kind of practice or promising change for the communities that I'm interested in. And so I wanted to present this really to, and some of you may be very familiar with this, but this whole idea of emotional intelligence. Increasingly, you know, people are being asked into organizations not just because they have kind of technical skills, but they have this kind of emotional intelligence. This whole idea, going back to what I said earlier, I need to know where I am before I can begin to move the needle for other people. And so it all starts with my appreciation of, I know this issue of self-awareness. Self-awareness means that I know what my hot buttons are. I know what my my values are. I know what's driving me, and I know, you know, how some of those things may affect other people. I mean, there are people out there who lack the self-awareness, who don't understand that every time that there's a group talking and all of a sudden it gets quiet when they walk up, it never occurs to them that they're the reason why nobody has anything to say anymore. They lack an appreciation for how they're perceived, or how their moves may kind of influence people around them. So it begins with, again, my understanding kind of my own moods, my drives, my emotions, but then it goes into the self-regulation. If I know what my hot buttons are, then that means that I can control them. If I need to go up to get a point across, if I need to go down to get a point across, I know enough about what's necessary to change the mood. I can suspend judgment. I can think before I act. I can understand that, look, just because it looks like it's going to be the same way again, I can maybe change, by changing my response, toning down my response, come up with a different outcome, right? I can do if people are used to me talking about X, Y, Z, you know, I know this is a situation where I need to talk about something else. This whole idea of self-regulation. So rather than relying on somebody else to kind of change the channel for me, so to speak, I'm doing it for myself. And so again, I want you to kind of think about this in terms of when you go into a community, you know, how do you present the story? How do you present yourself, right? How do people see you as someone that really is taking the time to kind of manage the atmosphere, so to speak? Motivation, I think, is something that is pretty self-explanatory. I mean, what is driving you in the work that you're doing right now? I mean, what is it about the populations that you're currently serving, are getting a chance to serve, that has you excited, that has you enthusiastic about some of the opportunities that are currently on the table? Again, you're doing the work with energy because you know that it's important work. Empathy goes from, basically, it's an appreciation for that it's not just about me, right? Empathy means that I can put myself in somebody else's shoes and experience what that feels like. My example earlier when I talked about this issue of you know, getting needs met. If you've never had to take a bus, you can. If you've always had kind of first-class transportation, you may not know what it's like to have to wait for the bus, or have to wait for the taxi, or have to wait to share a car with 3 other people. And so you may not be empathetic to the issues that somebody may arrive in. You've got this great meeting, you've got this great community meeting, and you're frustrated because people are getting there late. Well, understand, I had to wait for the babysitter to show up. I had to wait for the car to come. And so all these other kinds of things, it means that I'm going to put myself in somebody else's shoes and think about what might it be like to be in a room where everybody's speaking and you have no idea what they're saying because they're not speaking a language that you understand. Empathy means that I'm going to think about what that might be like and try to, if it hurts me or if it causes me pain, then I'm going to do what I can to make sure that other people don't have that pain. And then social skill basically says that, look, I work, you know, you're working in groups, you're working in teams. You basically recognize that in order to get the work done, you have to find a way to work with other people. You have to get other people engaged and excited about what you're trying to do. And so your ability, your social skill in terms of getting people connected, excited, may mean the difference between success and failure in some of the communities that that you're targeting with your projects. I've already talked about the fact that, look, the organization can make it tougher. It is possible to be a very competent individual around some of these issues and work for or with an organization that's insensitive to some of these issues. And part of what you have to do is to find a way to move the organization as well. You've got to demonstrate that the sensitivity and the competency matters. You have to demonstrate to people how others see them in the community. If they're trying to say, why are we doing this? Why aren't people coming to our events? And part of what you have to get them to think about are some of those blind spots that an organization can have. And try to get them to lead through those different barriers, so to speak. You also know that part of this, the challenge for you with the work that you're doing, is to recognize that you've got your expertise, but the community also has their experts and their expertise. And so the challenge is to, you know, how do you create a space where the experts in the community are willing to share their expertise with you, and an outsider or maybe someone that may be new to the organization or new to the community. I mean, how do you demonstrate that you're someone that can be trusted and be able to, again, partner with some of those organizations instead of assuming that we have to do everything? Are we partnering with organizations who might be able to kind of lighten the load for us, make it easier for us to get some of the work done? Because, again, part of what we're recognizing is that it really is much more a collaborative environment that we're being asked to work in. And so it really is around, how do I figure out who are the partners that I must have in the work that I'm doing, and what are their issues and needs, and again, how do I demonstrate that we have a shared interest in a particular set of clients, a particular geography, and again, demonstrating that in some of the work that we're trying to do. I have a second question for you. What questions would you put on a list of questions to help you understand how individuals from different groups view the issues that you are concerned about? So thinking about kind of the aims of your particular projects, what are some of the questions that you'd like to have answered, you know, in terms of...
If you all could take a minute to either raise your hand or send us a question. Okay, we'll go ahead with calling folks. Let's start off with Merced. Let's see if Merced has any comments. I'm going to go ahead and unmute Luis and also Janice, who I know is not there, but the rest of the team. So if you guys have any comments, now might be this time to share with regards. I can't find that team. Oh, there.
Hello, this is Luis.
Yes, go ahead, Luis.
I don't have any questions right now, actually.
Okay. How about the rest of the team in Tri-City? Do you have a comment to her question? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and mute our Tri-City team and go ahead and unmute our Merced team. So that's going to be Monica and Eric, Kelly, and we also have okay, that's it. Oh, Marissa. you guys have any comments with regards to this question? What questions would you put on the list?
We're so quiet. Can you hear me? This is Monica.
Yes. Thank you,
Okay,
Monica.
well, I know as a group we met this morning and we're talking about some questions for our target population. I don't know if Kelly wanted to answer this with some of the things that we were talking about this morning, or if you don't feel comfortable, you could just say pass.
This is Kelly. Well, I just found a report and actually synthesizing and going through some of the questions about some of the barriers and comfortableness of releasing any information. Is this something that they would actually prefer as having an option or a choice as far as on a medical record choosing their sexual orientation, gender identity? Is this something that they even view as of importance when they go to the doctor's office, of having that choice right up front instead of divulging it when prompted?
Great. Thanks. Go ahead, Dr. Lewis.
No, I was going to say I think that's a great question. I mean, that's a great issue. I mean, it's like it's one of those things where you want to do what makes people feel acknowledged, respected, and so the real question again, it's like right now you have to deal with the fact that people may be in one camp or the other, but what you want to communicate is that you're listening and you're willing to make the appropriate changes if it means that much to the people that you serve. Right, and so I really do think it's having it available to everybody just makes it easier to remember. You know what I mean? It's like so it doesn't have to be it's like everything is we're trying to move to a checklist with so many different things. But what we're really trying to say is that there should be some things that are standard and that you should be expected to get every time you go to the provider. Right? And part of one of the things that we expect when we go to a provider is for a provider to acknowledge who we are, right? And so how do we, in kind of the messages that we send, the materials that we put in front of patients, recognize that we may see a different type of patient population. And so just seeing that, right, when other people are hiding it may make me more willing to kind of trust in what you're trying to do.
Great. Any other additional comments that you guys wanted to add from Team Merced? Glad to hear you guys submit. Okay, so with no other comments, I'm going to go ahead and mute you guys, and then we'll shift over to, let's go to Los Angeles. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute Sandra. I don't know if we can speak to you or if you can send us a message. And I think Vandana is also there. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute you too. Any comments you'd like to add to this question?
Sure. This is Vandana. This is a tough question, but a great question. And I just have a comment rather than a question. I think it's important to create a culture of trust. So how do you, I mean, it's all well and great. We all talk about it. Like, yes, we should have culture competency. Yes, we must understand. But how do you actually, kind of penetrate? How do you get the buy-in in terms of actually getting the commitment of people working on this to actually understand, how the inner workings of a culture, like, well, what does it really mean to understand, and just being an open. And I think part of it is that it's creating a culture of trust, that it's okay to say something that you may not be so familiar or comfortable with, but to get a clarification that make people feel, it's okay to ask questions so you can have a better understanding. And not every question is going to be, I think it's a matter of trust, gaining people's trust. I think that's what's coming to my mind right now. But
so. Yeah, so the reason why I started with this idea of being comfortable making other people uncomfortable, and I really want to stress the fact that when we do stuff that makes us uncomfortable, we normally shut down. But if we're going to have an honest conversation around difference, then we've got to be willing to help people work through that discomfort, right? We've got to be willing to help people to understand, no, it's not going to be easy to put yourself in a position where, you know, everything that you're used to happening isn't happening. But this is the reality for the communities that we're trying to connect with, right? And so it really is giving people, number one, the permission to be uncomfortable, but also holding people accountable. And so, and by that I mean, if I see a team member or a community member or a coworker do something that I think is culturally inappropriate, I have a decision to make. Either I'm going to use that as a teachable moment to talk about why it was inappropriate, or I'm going to do nothing and somebody will have a chance to do it again. And so the way you get people to move is, like I say, it goes back to me. Am I willing to encourage people to move by celebrating when they do something right and challenging them when they do something that's inappropriate? Because I don't think so long as people believe they're not going to be held accountable for making change, that they will make changes.
Okay, we're going to move on to San Francisco. So I'm going to unmute Mr. Nelson and also Kim. So glad you guys could join us. Is anyone else on your team with you?
This is Kim. Juan Ibarra was supposed to join us, but unfortunately he's out sick. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, Nelson, did you want to start off and then I can chime in?
Oh. It's Nelson. Hello?
Uh-huh.
So I don't really have a question right off the bat to your question, but I think one thing we are experiencing with the community that we're working with, of course, we're focusing on the African American Health Initiative, and one of the things that I think we're learning is just how much and how often system perspective tend to weigh in. And that's a very it's a very challenging process and we're learning a lot from that. And I think a lot of times it just really needs to have. I think those of us from the Department of Public Health team, we're learning that we have to kind of keep each other in check. And be honest and having the honesty to do that, and just, you know, and also more importantly that we're all learning from the whole process. So I think the piece that we're working on now is basically trying to document that process, because I think and hoping that this will also inform other things we're going to do in partnering and collaborating with ethnic and cultural communities in the future. But I think in that, a lot of times I think it's just asking the questions and in the presentations we want to make sure that we're speaking the same language, or speaking or coming or understanding our worldview. So I think that's just my piece. I just want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that that we document what's happening, because it does become, again, for me, it becomes another learning opportunity for, you know, maybe not my team, but another team, right? And so you're building kind of a body of knowledge around working with a particular population. You know, you're talking about the issues that you may have thought were important but that are no longer important, the issues that you would have never expected that have percolated up. And so, again, it gives everybody kind of a heads up, and it gives you a different kind of starting point for the next thing that you try to do with that community, or, as you said, in other ethnic communities. I mean, but again, it really is around, you have to deal with, in some instances, how communities see the organizations that you represent all well, and dealing with those kinds of reservations and working through those reservations. So I'm glad to hear that that's what's happening.
On Monday? This is Kim.
No. Okay.
I want to underscore what
Monday or Tuesday, you said?
Monday. You guys. Oh.
Just saying Monday. Monday's the
Go ahead, Kim.
Go
ahead.
So to underscore what Nelson was saying is that city staff are really learning to move in pace with the community, because that's what the most important thing. You know, we do realize the system's parameters and deadlines, but we want to be better partners with the community and follow along at their own pace, and especially with respect to how they view trauma. You know, from the Department of Public Health, we're thinking of how do we help the community work through the trauma that they're experiencing. But what the community members are telling us is how their trauma is related to jobs and education and loss of hope. And these are perspectives that we never really took the time to consider. And so it's really forcing city staff to look at what we thought an approach that we would address health disparity, but the community members are seeing it from a different systems lens, and for us to be open and start to hear them better.
Right. I mean, I think
get on the same page, speak the same language, and
right.
Work.
Right. I mean, I think it's great that you built in the flexibility that in terms of listening to what was going on on the ground, excuse me, and rather than developing a program that people may not have seen value in,
yes,
you're starting from where people are and saying, okay, we hear you, and again, it just speaks back to the credibility issue. It's like they heard, they responded, and now I'm willing to get into maybe a deeper conversation or a deeper relationship with these folks because they get it, and so. That's what you hope would happen, that you suspend, I think that's the humility that I was talking about earlier says, I went into the community expecting A and I got B and I got ready for B. You know what I mean? Because there will be people that will still go in with A. It's like, I don't care that they want B, I'm ready for A, and that's what we're going to give them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad you're not those people.
We're working on it. We're working on ourselves.
Okay.
Great. Any additional comments with regards to this question that's been posed to us? If so, please raise your hand or submit a question. With no hands raised, we'll let you continue, Dr. Lewis.
Okay, so I just have a couple of more slides, and so I wanted to share this with you again. It's part of a report that I'm going to also reference, and you may have seen it already, but really just in terms of, again, getting people to talk about the issue, the problem in their language, as opposed to, talking about it from my framework, and again, just being willing to walk through that process in terms of, what may really be driving what we're seeing. In addressing those issues kind of on a broader perspective. And again, you may not have to go through the whole list, but to really kind of think about, where are some of the leverage points, where are some of the missed opportunities, and again, that last one about fear, again, in some communities, fear is the biggest mobilizer, and so if I know what's causing the fear, then that may be the biggest kind of opportunities for intervention that I may be able to come up with, or movement that I may be able to come up with. You will have these links, and again, I use the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality because they have two responsibilities, right? They exist as an organization to provide information on how we're doing as a nation as it relates to healthcare quality, but also how we're doing as it relates to addressing health disparities. And that particular link is their innovation site, and that is where they're getting all the information around what are some of the best things that are happening on the ground right now in a whole host of areas that we're concerned about. And that toolkit is one of the things that's where the questions on the previous page come from, but it really is around, as everyone is talking about evidence-based practice and needing to do evidence-based practice, I mean, they basically provide a toolkit for figuring out how can we take what may be kind of common practice in one community and begin to kind of think about how we might tailor it to address a different demographic, whether it be race, ethnicity, or maybe gender, maybe age, but to recognize, and the reason why I wanted to give you these examples is to basically say, you know, we're even though we all think that we're original, there is work that's already been done that we can use that may kind of help you to fast track some of the work that you're doing, and if not fast track it, maybe make it a little bit easier to get it done. And so I just put those in front of you to kind of, again, get you thinking about maybe at one point your programs will be on that innovations link because you're doing things that are kind of cutting edge. But it really means that in order for me to do that, again, I've got to meet the community where they are, not where they think I ought to be, because, again, one can lead to success and one can lead to lots of frustration for all of the parties involved. And then the last question was, what do you do when you get there? It's basically celebrate. Sometimes, again, I've been working in the same community since 1999, and if I had to wait to celebrate until I had everything I wanted in the community, then I'd still be waiting for a party. And so I think what we need to recognize is that small victories are still victories, and they need to be celebrated, and the community needs to be part of that celebration, because, again, we're saying that we're all in this together, and we get to celebrate together. And I said I had an hour and a half to speak, and it is almost, well, a little bit over. And so this is my contact information. I know we have the space till 12 o'clock, and so I'm looking to the Healy folks in terms of what you want me to do next.
Well, I think at this point we can just open it up. I know you had some pretty targeted questions that we've invited people to respond to. But if people do have general kind of comments or questions, feedback for Dr. Lewis, questions connected to the assignment that you all did, anything, I kind of would maybe just open it up at this point so you can raise your hand or pose your question, and we'll go from there. So if you do have any questions, let us know. If not, we will, kind of continue forward with some information specific to the project, but we do want to just give an opportunity for questions specifically for Dr. Lewis in this webinar.
Are you guys always this quiet? That's my question.
We haven't muted.
It seems there's a couple of questions, but no, there's no question.
Okay. Thank you for your time and your attention.
Oh, thank you so much. Can we, those of you will be clapping from Lisa from over here. So thank you, Dr. Lewis, for your time. You're welcome to stay on the line if you'd like. There's just a few more things, housekeeping pieces for the project that we're going to share with the participants. But if you want to disconnect, you're welcome to do that at this point. So thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm out.
Okay, we just saw one comment that, she's already disconnected, I think.
I'm still here.
Okay, great. So one participant kind of did a great presentation, exclamation point. So,
well, thank you, and have a great weekend.
All right, thank you.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so we just wanted to spend the next few minutes doing some housekeeping related to HELI and things that are coming up, and make sure that if you do have any questions specific to the project that we have an opportunity to respond to those at this point. And so I'm going to share with you a couple of different things that are coming up, and then I'll open it up, especially, by the way, to the rest of the team to see if there's anything else. Okay. So the one thing I wanted to be sure that everyone knew is that our next webinar is scheduled for January 17th. And we will, at that point, be hearing about cultivating community leadership specifically. That is our topic for that webinar. We hope that you all will, again, make arrangements to be present or to be with your teams so that you can participate in that. We also wanted to acknowledge that it's almost the end of the year, and so we are quickly moving forward with the project in terms of also wanting to come visit with you again and to check in about how things are working and progressing with your teams and with your initiatives. And we appreciate having some conversations with the leads from the teams or having opportunities to speak with some of you more directly independently. And so wanted to still, again, offer that as an option prior to those visits that will be happening in February. We'll be reaching out to you to begin to schedule those times. If, however, you guys are meeting or have an opportunity to begin to identify some dates and times that work for you all as a collective, we imagine we'll do another half day with you. Feel free to please email that information to Christina, and she will help with getting us coordinated. Helen may also be reaching out, so someone from our team will be helping us to get those scheduled. So we're looking forward to having a chance to come back and visit with you again. The other thing is we do have a sixth webinar, a final webinar, which we are arranging and trying to get scheduled for March. We'll provide you with more information as that becomes available. But we've had some conversations with you about topics and issues, and we'll be finalizing that, and we'll let you know when that is complete. The other thing that's, at least on my mind, two other things that I was thinking about that I wanted to make sure to mention. One is the Strength Finders information. We appreciate, we know from the regional meetings that most or almost everyone had a chance to take that instrument. In our recent conversation with the leads from the teams, part of what we were encouraging each of you to do is to, if you haven't already, to please take an opportunity to share your results with each other, to think about how you might integrate what your strengths are, what your talents are, into the particular roles and expectations and ways in which you're working together on this team. And then the final thing, at least on my kind of short list of things to mention, and then we'll see if others from the CIMH team have other things to mention, is related to documentation. So Dr. Lewis today was speaking quite in depth at different points about the importance of that and recognizing that as being significant to learning, for the work that you're doing, and then just kind of for the future. And so I wanted to remind you that Christy Oliveira, Christy O, as well as Steve Russos and his team from ACRD, I know has been reaching out to each of you, wanting to support whatever needs that you may have related to your measurement and evaluation kind of process and perspectives, and also just kind of documenting what is happening within your team and what your process has been and that kind of thing. And so we will be, I encourage you to connect with them and to follow up with them related to their process. And know that we will likely be reaching out and asking you to send us a quick summary about kind of where things are. We recognize that some teams have made some shifts or are having some discussions about fine-tuning their aims, which is great. And at the start of the year, we definitely want to have a good sense of where you are, who's doing what, kind of what the timeline and the rollout is. So we will be in touch about that as well. I'm looking around to see if Will or Helen, the others of us that are gathered here, have any comments. I might be shaking some heads.
I just want to encourage everyone. There's a lot of learning that's happening and a lot of growing. I know you have a lot of other work to do, and so things might seem slow in terms of how you might traditionally measure progress in the Institute. But from what we're hearing, what we're talking, what we're seeing, there is some like I said, learning that's happening and advances that are happening in different ways. So to remind you that we really are going to be trying to celebrate that at the end of the year of this Institute, and to just keep that in mind, that we're going to have this opportunity for you to present what you've learned to a broader audience. That we really think that what you're learning will be a great benefit. So so to continue to be encouraged and to think about that you have this, you're going to have this opportunity to feature what you're learning and to share that, because there's so much that people need to learn about how to really make a difference to change the way things are right now and actually eliminate the disparities that are currently being produced by our systems. And so you're all making progress in different ways in trying to change the results are being produced by the systems that you're currently in. And so what you're learning about how to produce new results and how to get there, even if you haven't produced new results yet, the different ways of getting there is going to be really important to share with other folks. So keep up the good work, and keep on learning and growing, and we really look forward to hearing from you and being able to see you shine in a leadership role at the end of the Institute in a statewide meeting where you can really demonstrate the leadership that you have been building over the years. So just want to keep encouraging you.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you, Will, for acknowledging all the progress that is happening and all the learning that's happening in the Institute. And a reminder, too, that this is a pilot year and we are all learning. I think as a team that is helping to structure the Institute, that there's a lot of progress that we're learning along the way, too. So I think we will, at this last moment, just see if there's any other questions. I'm not seeing any other hands. So we just invite you all to share this information with your fellow team members. We have recorded this session. We will have access as well to the PowerPoint information. You can access it on the HELI website. I know some people have indicated they didn't have access, and if that's the case, please shoot an email to Christina, and she will kind of send you the information, or we'll make sure to get you added. I know some folks have recently been transitioned to teams or off teams. Okay, well then with that, last comment, we thank you again for being here today and hope that you'll have a fabulous weekend and enjoy all of the holiday celebrations that you might be participating in, and just look for continued contact from us. Thank you. Bye.